Tony, weather-wise, it's been very different.
Yeah, I mean we're still in this very strong El Nino type pattern. It's just sort of swung a little bit more around to the west southwest than west northwest, northwest.
Yeah.
Bit of a tongue twister there. So we're getting these periods of relatively cool weather. You know, and 10 or 12 days ago we had that southerly come through. It actually left some snow on the mountains, both here and in the North Island. So that immediately lowers our temperatures a little bit. And what it's done is it's just given us a little bit of respite as far as irrigation demand is concerned. Number of our clients that we've spoken to, both here and in the North Island, it meant that, you know, particularly the arable farmers, you can suddenly back off on irrigating everything and be picky about what you're going to irrigate. So very important this season that you take those opportunities to not irrigate when you get these cooler periods, or when you get a period when you might get 10 or 15 millimetres of rain and you get the opportunity to just back off a little bit, because that water that you might have otherwise decided, well, we'll just keep going during that period, might be very invaluable, incredibly valuable when you get to February or March next year.
Monitoring becomes exceedingly important.
Absolutely, exceedingly important. I think we've talked about this once already, this sort of irrigation season, about how important in a long, what is potentially a long irrigation season with a fixed volume that you can use here and in the North Island and in areas like that, that you make sure you stay within your limit. And these are great opportunities to just to switch off. It might not be very much. It'll be a few thousand cubic metres a day that you're not irrigating with, but it might be very handy at the other end of the season.
Tell me about self-limiting bores.
Yeah, I've alluded to low water levels this year. I mean, particularly in parts of Canterbury, less so in Hawke's Bay, for example, and in the Pukekohe area. Our water levels are relatively low this year in the groundwater, and when that happens, there's the potential for a bore to become self-limiting. Now, often people associate that with a bore drying up, for example. So if you've got a consent to take 50 litres a second, for example, and you have a constant discharge pump, which most of our pumps are, there are variable speed drives out there which can moderate how much water is actually taken. But if you've got a constant discharge pump, then when it turns on, it wants to pump 50 litres a second, and it will draw down X metres when you do that of groundwater so that it can get the water. What happens when we have a self-limiting bore is that the water levels are sufficiently low that when you turn on and you get that drawdown, you start sucking air. That's the worst case scenario, because then that's what causes cavitation, which is air being bounced around inside the system. It does rather horrible things to bearings and submersible pumps, and normally will end up in something coming out of the ground and getting repaired. But what it also does,
great at this time of year.
Yeah, it's Murphy's Law. You know, he's watching up there and he's going, cavitation,
Gotcha.
boomfo, bore out of there, crane comes in, and you're down for a few days until you can get, or a week until you can get your pump fixed. The other thing that happens is that you do what we call fall off your pump curve. So particularly submersible pumps, they operate in the most efficient manner when they operate with heads of water above them. And when you get too much head, you don't have the energy to actually push the water to the top of the hole, and you're unable to pump your 50 litres a second. So you then start pumping less and less water for the same amount of power. And eventually you get to the point where actually, it just doesn't want to pump. So that's what a lot of times that's associated with bores that go dry. It's not the fact that there isn't any water there to pump. You just can't pump that 50 litres a second, or whatever that figure happens to be. So we're heading in the direction this year where potentially we could have the same situation occurring this year. The last time we had this was 2005-06 irrigation season, and because there's so many people out there pumping water, 2005-06 we had a lot of bores that were self-limiting. So instead of being able to pump their 50 litres a second, they were maybe only pumping 40 litres a second. Still, power meter still goes around and you still pay the same power bill, but you pump less water. So that then affects the operation of the irrigation, whatever irrigation system you've got. It may result in not enough flow, for example, to turn a rotarainer as most effectively as it is. And you'll start to see, particularly on centre pivots and big linears, you'll start to see changes in their irrigation spray patterns because there's not enough water.
So you should be checking those anyhow with your row of buckets.
That's right. Well, actually, no, you'll see that with flow meters. These days, everybody with a big tank will have a flow meter.
Oh, okay.
And they will see that they're no longer pumping their 50 litres a second, they're pumping less than that. And it will be because their water levels are low. Now, in a lot of older bores, there's the opportunity to actually add some rising column because you may not have your pump right down above the screen. So in the construction of a bore, there's a big hole in the ground, there's a screen where the aquifer is, and then a pump is sitting somewhere
between there and the surface.
Between there and the surface. And in some of the older bores, well, you know, the water level's at 5 metres and we've got 80 metres to go, so if we stick it about 50, we'll be right. Well, here's the opportunity right now. If our water levels are really low, check how much water you've got above your pump. And if you're getting down in that sort of 5 to 6 or 7 metres left above your pump now, which we know there's a number of people out there, great opportunity to add some rising column to your bore, get your pump down, and you've then got access to another 5 to 10 or 15 metres of water, which will probably get you through this season.
So that's the solution.
That's a solution. Yep. Yep. If you're right there, then you need the ability. If you're sitting right on top of your screen, then the ability to actually shut down the amount of water you take out of your bore is vital, so that you don't burn out your pump and create other problems that are going to become much more expensive. The crudest way of doing that is you close the gate valve down a bit, so you create a little bit of back pressure in the system, you reduce the flow, you up the pressure, and burn a bit more power. Or if you've got a variable speed drive on your pump, then you want to just ramp it down. You have the ability to automatically do that by changing the frequency at which the pump operates.
Yep.
And therefore you can pump less water. So there are some solutions that are less damaging, and there's some solutions that are going to be very damaging.
Who do you talk to work out which solution to use?
Well, you need to talk to your pump guy or your irrigation company. One of the things you do need to know is you need to know how deep your bore is, you need to know how big a screen you've got in there, and you must know where your pump's sitting. There's a number of people that don't know where their pump is. And that's no fault of their own. I mean, when everything was put in 15 or 20 years ago, water levels were fine, didn't really matter, there wasn't as much demand. Now's the opportunity to deal with that. So unless they've had their pump out of the ground in recent times, they really won't know how much rising column they've got.
Tony, thank you very much indeed.